Thank you. All right, so welcome to Board Strong's annual roundtable focused on board chairs. We have more than 150 people registered for today's session, and I'm glad you could join us. My name is Megan Allen, and I am CEO of Board Strong. Just a few housekeeping items before we get started. First off, all attendees are on mute. This roundtable will be recorded, and you will receive a link to the recording tomorrow. Please go ahead, take a moment, introduce yourself in the chat box, and please use the chat box as well if you have any comments or questions throughout the panel discussion. Board Strong is a nonprofit working to create a vibrant and healthy nonprofit sector by strengthening and improving the governance and management of nonprofit organizations. Our work includes providing board training, consultation, and many, many other services for boards. Our online board recruitment platform, Board Strong Connections, connects organizations to talented and diverse board candidates from outside their networks. We would like to thank our sponsor for today's panel, Council Services Plus, which is an affiliate of the New York Council of Nonprofits. The mission of Council Services Plus is to provide quality service, comprehensive coverage, and competitively priced insurance and employee benefits to nonprofits. And now I'll just briefly introduce our panel. First off, we have David Birdsell, who will be our moderator. He is chair of the New York Council of Nonprofits Board, as well as a board member of Board Strong. He is also provost and senior vice president for academic affairs at Kean University. John Kuznia is board president of Captain Community Human Services. He is principal consultant of Truman Solutions, as well as an HR expert with the New York Council of Nonprofits. And finally, we welcome Mary Allen Pichet, who is the former board president of the Albany Public Library System and is a healthcare and nonprofit consultant. Thank you, everyone, for being here. And for now, we'll turn it over to David.
Thank you so much, Megan. Good afternoon, everybody. It's great to be here with you. Really looking forward to the conversation about the vital role on every board in the nonprofit sector played by the board chair under whatever title. Some of you are presidents, and I'm pleased to see in the chat that there are several board presidents or board chairs already lining up for this conversation. And we look forward as well, after the conversation that we have among ourselves, to your questions, your comments, and your insight to this role in these particularly challenging times. And let's make it clear that these are challenging times, but this has always been a demanding job. And I'm really pleased to be talking with two people who have deep experience in board leadership, in John Kuznia and in Mary Ellen Pichet. I wonder if the two of you would just take a couple of seconds each to outline what your organization is, what it does, how many people you have working for the organization right now, and maybe a couple of words about your day job, how you came to this role. So why don't we begin at the top left of my screen, and that's with John.
Thank you very much, Dave. And it's, first of all, I'm very happy to be participating in this panel. I'm actually a first-year board president, but I've been on the board for about 7 years. Captain Community Human Services is located in Clifton Park, New York. As the name implies, we're a human service agency providing supports to youth and families in crisis, seniors, and a wide array, a very broad array of services to the community at large. Been around for about 40 years, the organization has, and it's a wonderful place to be and to be part of the board. On my day job, I actually am a management consultant specializing in HR, and lately we've been spending an awful lot of time working with NICON members. So I'm between what I do as a board president and what I do for a career, I'm completely immersed in nonprofit management and board development, things like that. So I'm happy to be sharing what experiences I can today.
Thanks very much, John. Mary Ellen.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. Happy to be here today. So I'm currently the chair of the governance committee of the International Center for the Capital Region. And that's a national, actually a global organization that promotes global diplomacy in its particular service area. So we service 22 counties. And like most nonprofits, you'll all resonate with this, we have a very tiny, tiny staff. So it's 2 part-time folks and a number of volunteers. And this board is really hands-on working board. In the past, I've served as president of Albany Public Library Board of Directors, Historic Albany Foundation, Rockefeller College's Center for Women in Government, and as vice chair of WMHT board. My day job, as mentioned, is a healthcare consultant, and that's internationally. And then locally, I serve as a consultant for nonprofits in strategic planning and governance. And I'm a faculty member of the American College of Healthcare Executives.
Terrific. Thank you so much. So lots of experience to tap here. I'd like to start with the kind of long wave questions about the role of the board chair in sort of marshaling activity at the board level. Can you talk a little bit about your experience as a board chair? And I think, Mary Ellen, I'd like to start with you, talking about the difference between boards that are predominantly strategic and fiduciary in their functions and the kind of hands-on board that you belong to right now. What works, what doesn't, what translates?
Right. So I have found in my experience on the number of boards that I have served on is the need for an approach, a structure, process, and outcome approach. So often you need to help as a board chair or a board member to build that infrastructure. Because traditionally nonprofits have been a little weak in that area, but they're getting much, much better with resources like Nikon and all the others. And some of those structural pieces include a solid strategic plan. But at the same time, what kind of resources do you have to put that plan together? So I looked to the simple plan from a Pennsylvania Library Association and use that in the strategic planning that I do with boards. And, you know, it has goals, objectives, review of the mission and vision, and a dashboard to track activities. Some of the other structural pieces, when you think about recruiting board members, new board members, and as a chair, working with your governance committee, do you have the requirements, the skill sets, the experience, the networks that you're looking for, and then align that with a current inventory of your board members? Where's the gap? How do you recruit to fill that gap? And once a board member, when you're onboarding, I use something called a pledge, which is kind of framed give, get, and give, or give, get, and engage. And so it kind of lays out the expectations early on as somebody's onboarding to a new board for them, what the expectations are, and then what commitment they're willing to make. So it's a nice thing to revisit on an annual basis. And then some of the other tools, an annual board self-assessment, which can fold into the annual operations plan. And certainly templates. I'm kind of in the template business, having worked for the federal government for 35 years. So I always bring my templates, whether they're committee charters or meeting minute templates, just to make the work easier to be done. And then finally, a critical success factor is that relationship between the board chair and the executive director. And so when I was a board chair, I would meet at least monthly, face to face, with the executive director for planning, for discussion, for whatever needed to be done, and most importantly, to build and nurture the relationship.
Thank you so much. There are so many great ideas there and some very concrete suggestions about how to shepherd the board and think about getting people on the same page. John, do you use those kinds of tools in your practice, either as a board member previously or now as the president of your board? What do you do to try to figure out how best to acquire and marshal the human capital that you need?
Mary Ellen made some very good points about having some structures in place and some systems in place. Everything from, board training to a very clear and deliberate process to recruit board members. And what's interesting is when I started with Captain's Board 6 years ago, a lot of this was not in place. So I've been very happy to watch a board evolve. Boards evolve from a working board to a governing board, and they're always somewhere in the middle. The goal is to become a governing board with a strong executive, right? But in order to get there, some of the things, frankly, all the things that Mary Ellen mentioned need to be in place. I think clear expectations of what the board members are to do and what the executive is to do. What I have found in my practice, as well as my experience as a board president, is that oftentimes if those expectations are not made clear as to the roles and responsibilities between the board and the executive, if they're not very clear, then it's very hard to set those expectations and then hold an executive director accountable. I think getting the right people on the board, to go back to that, comes to a very deliberate recruitment process. And frankly, I look at it just like hiring a position in your organization. You look in your organization, you think of all the skills you need in order to run that business. You need a certain amount of skills and a diversity of skills to run a board. And where you are lacking or where you have a gap in those skills, you should be very deliberate and strategic about identifying people who have those skills to fill that slot. And if you do that properly, you'll have hopefully a well-rounded board, and that will certainly make the process easier when it comes to dealing with your executive director.
Great, that's great. So let me try to dig a little bit deeper into some of this, particularly in the area of engagement. When both of you talk about roles, it's obviously somewhat different if you're talking about a hands-on board where you actually need somebody who might be able to represent the organization legally, for example, or might be able to help process the budget or prepare the 990 or whatever it is, from that board that is really focused on strategy and governance, and is not involved in the day-to-day practice. How do you ensure in either of those two situations that board members are actually doing what they have agreed to do, which ideally aligns with what you want them to do?
If I may,
Please.
Again, when you're clarifying expectations, I think it's great to start out with, we have a job description for a board member. We create a job description for the executive as well as a board member. Some boards call them just a list of expectations, could be whatever you want to call it. But it's going to talk about being an ambassador for the organization. It's going to be talking about your role in fundraising, being prepared for every meeting, all kinds of bringing a certain skill to the board. Having those expectations laid out very clearly always helps, because it's just like it's performance management, right? Just like with an employee, if somebody's not meeting the expectations that you've laid out, it makes it a lot easier for you, especially as a board president, to take that uncomfortable step of saying, by the way, here's what you agreed to and here's what you signed on for. And to be honest with you, you're not making it in these couple of areas. And we think it's important that you do. Why? Because all the other board members are, and we're a team that we all want to participate at the highest level. It's a difficult conversation, but if you've ever had to have a performance conversation with an employee, it's actually very similar. Mary Ellen?
Mary Ellen, you're muted.
You're muted.
Of course I am, because I was coughing. Thank you. Yeah, I'd like to piggyback on that. Certainly having the position description or the pledge is the tool that I'm familiar with, or something that sets those expectations up front. But all too often we see boards where the ongoing commitment is variable. There are people who are fully engaged and then people who are minimally engaged, and all along that spectrum. So yeah, it really is the board chair's responsibility, and the committee chairs as well, to kind of monitor that. And committee chairs can, certainly manage the activity and the engagement on their particular committees, but the overall board responsibility lies with the board president. And having those crucial conversations, but I'd like to kind of offer an alternative. If this isn't what you thought you signed up for, or your commitment has changed, or your time availability has changed, what other kind of role can we find for you? Is it an advisor? Is it a volunteer? Is it some other role? Because we know you're interested in this organization. We want to keep you engaged. Let's negotiate that. So I think that's an alternative if the person isn't really able to step up and fully meet their commitment.
Oh, that's a very important point. So you give people an off-ramp with a destination in mind as opposed to simply closing the door.
Yeah.
Makes sense. John,
And
please.
I would also offer that the same mechanism can work when you're recruiting board members, new board members. Oftentimes somebody may not call it an on-ramp, if you will, Dave, that, this is one way to work your way into a board. Usually it could start with a volunteer position, one of the committees that takes community members. So it's good. We've had situations where somebody was interested in getting onto the board, and we said, well, you know what? Maybe they should become a little bit more aware of what we do. So take that on-ramp using a committee or a volunteer position to eventually get on the board too.
And there are a number of boards, particularly larger boards, that have advisory committees that are not composed of members of the fiduciary board.
Right.
But that allows you to sort of kick the tires on one another and define new areas of potential utility for the organization, of satisfaction for the potential board member. Let me ask a ticklish question, and that's about fundraising. Many organizations, and this varies by location, it varies by sector, all organizations look to the board to help figure out how to fund the organization. But some organizations look to the board for a very substantial chunk of the philanthropy that flows into the organization, which may be personal, which may be something that is gotten from others, the classic give-get scenario. When you have a range of different capacities and proven ability to either give or get, how do you manage those expectations on the board? And how do you make it plain, particularly for organizations that have a stated give-get number, less and less common owing to equity concerns and a variety of other things? But for those organizations that have it, for people who can't quite get there, how do you deal with those situations?
Well, I'll just give one example, or maybe two. So at ICCR, International Center for the Capital Region, as part of our pledge, we set the minimum buy-in, if you will, and it's an annual dues. And we expect people to participate in the annual appeal, the achievement awards, and then we'll take an endowment at any time. And this is all laid out in the pledge. And so, and the dues are due on a specific time, and the executive director will follow up on that with folks. So, it kind of sets the floor, and there is no ceiling, but people walk in and they know that. And if they're struggling, we also have a caveat. If you have difficulty meeting your pledge in the financial arena, please let us know. So, trying to be set clear expectations, but be humane about it, and having the ability, well, if you can't do this, what can you do, kind of thing. Who can you reach out to? Who's in your network who would be able to fund us in a different kind of way or special way? So giving lots of options and alternatives for people to be able to engage in the way that best fits them.
That's great. John?
And I'd like to follow up on that with, when Mary Ellen mentions different ways to contribute, we have a phrase at Captain. It's called time, talent, and treasure. And that's what a board member can bring to the party. They can bring their time, whether they volunteer in the programs. They can bring their talent. For example, that's how I got on the board. I happened to be an HR guy, and they needed some HR people on the board. So I brought my talent. Or you bring your treasure. And that is either you're able to open up your checkbook, or you have access to other people who can open up their checkbooks, which is great, because that's a multiplier effect right there. But I think that we also have board dues. I think it's very common to have board dues that set that floor, if you will. But I also think, to some extent, how many or how you target board members or potential new board members relative to their ability to bring money to the table, whether personally or through a network, also has to do at where you are in your evolution as a board and as an organization. For example, if you're an organization and you're launching a capital campaign, that's a significant lift, and you have a couple vacancies on your board, as we look to filling those gaps and those skills on a board, we may want to spend more time looking for people who have access to fundraising. So there may be points in time in the organization's evolution where driving more of a board focus on fundraising makes sense.
Yeah, John, you make a great point. I think, no situation is static. The needs change, the environment changes, and so the board has to be nimble and fluid enough to be able to respond and change and morph as the landscape changes as well.
Yeah,
Terrific. So go ahead, Jerry.
just as an example, we've got some vacancies, and we were having this discussion among the personnel committee. And out of all the skills that we look to have on the board, we basically selected, here's probably the top 3 we should go after at this point in time.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
it wasn't the same things we were going after 4 or 5 years ago.
That's right. That's right.
And we will be talking in just a few minutes about the particular challenges that the present day presents for us. But let's continue on with the hardy perennials, which is what we're hitting right now. One of the questions that I've heard from many people on boards is a question about how you build value into the board by educating the members of the board, which might be helping them to develop a level of comfort and skill with asking people for money, which might be about learning more about the areas of practice undertaken in the organization, not so that you can meddle in the executive director's or anybody else's daily life, but so that you can understand better and tell a better story about what you do. How have you and your colleagues in the organizations on boards that you've sat, how do you nurture talent on the board to help people be more effective?
If I may, we just actually something that we did several years ago and we've reinstituted. It does have to do with education in general, but I think it's geared actually more toward educating the board on the mission of the organization and helping them connect to the mission of the organization. We've decided that every board meeting, we're going to start off with a program presentation. In an organization that has very diverse services, even after 6 years, I couldn't tell you absolutely every type of program that Captain does. But I think it's important for boards to be able to reconnect to that mission by having people who work in the organization present to the board and show them, here's what this program is all about. Here's the people we connect with. Here's how we truly deliver these services. And here's the impact that we have on the community. Goes a long way toward helping board members become more, understanding of what the mission is, and then to be able to be the ambassadors out there in the community to describe that to people. Mariella?
Yeah, John, at Albany Public Library System and WMHT, regularly supervisors or managers of a given program area would come in and brief the board, not only about what they do, but what's coming. So that's a real good way for people to be informed and engaged. But then there's the education about how to be a good board member. What are your roles and responsibilities? What does that look like? So when I was involved with Historic Albany Foundation, we would send people to Nikon programs. So there's a little commercial for you. But, and then people would bring the information back and share. I think boards don't do that piece enough of exactly, ongoing education about how to be a high-performing board member and how to be a high-performing board.
And that has to be a collective conversation, right? Where
Yes.
people are reinforcing one another's commitments.
Mm-hmm.
And if I may, I think that's a great opportunity for board retreats. People,
Yeah.
Oftentimes, a board has an hour and a half to get together. They have their agendas, they get through things. But we have found that an annual retreat is an excellent opportunity, not only because you're going to have board member changes, the team is going to look different each year, perhaps, as members cycle on and off. But I think that's the reason you have a board retreat. Yes, it's a good idea to do some work and come out with some, action plans. But I always say the primary reason for a board retreat is to not work on the business, but to work on themselves as a group. And then you can have all kinds of team training. You can have board development training where we talk specifically about what the roles are. Last one we had was something along those lines. This is that job description I was talking about. Here are the expectations. Here's some financial information, because let's face it, a lot of board members are not comfortable with finances. And it's probably the second most important thing that a board undertakes is the financial stewardship of the organization. So you want to make sure that at least they have a enough education to understand the basics of a P&L or a balance sheet. So board retreats, I think, are an excellent opportunity to work on board development and education.
Yeah,
Right.
and one of the typical opportunities for improvement out of an annual self-assessment that the board does is the need for more time for creative and strategic discussion, that too much time is spent on report outs. And so, when I see that as a consultant, I said, okay, so do you have a consent agenda? Do you have a timed agenda so that your board business gets done? People come prepared to the meeting, and yeah, how far in advance of the board meeting, please, a week, do you send out the package so people can be prepared, can come to the meeting, that there are only topics for discussion, input, and vote that really come to the table, and then you have time for that strategic and creative discussion time. And yeah, I think retreats on an annual basis for a board for education, or to take a look at their most recent self-assessment and together say, okay, these are our strengths. How do we sustain these going forward? And here are our opportunities for improvement. So what action are we going to develop out of this as we go forward?
Terrific. I will I want to put a pin in that and come back to that in just a moment. But I wanted to let everybody on the webinar know I have a couple of more questions, and one of those questions at least will fold in the question from New York City Children's Theater. So stay tuned, coming right up. But now is the time to populate the the Q&A segment with your questions, and we'll get to as many as those as we can just after this next cycle. Just quickly to Marcus, who says, I'd really like to listen to this a second time. I can only take notes so fast. Sorry, Marcus, we're going to cram as much as possible. But yes, you will get a link, and you can listen to this as many times as you wish, and even slow it down to 3/4 speed, and it'll all work well. And that will go to everybody. You'll all have a second crack at this. So let me ask about just following up on this last piece on the importance of board retreats and creating opportunities to work on one another. Do you have in your head a set sort of budget floor or ceiling on what you do to think about facilitation and development? John, you'd mentioned bringing in a consultant to work with various aspects. I know many boards do that around the fundraising arena. Or is there a time budget? Kind of, if we're meeting for an hour and a half, at some level, every aspect of that meeting can be working on board relations, but an explicit period of that hour and a half that you spend on the board of itself. Either of you have sense of that? John?
Yes, actually, and I appreciate what Mary Ellen had said, is that what you want to do is you want to make your board meetings efficient, and because people are busy. And I like the idea that not only does it keep it interesting if every board meeting, let's say it's monthly, you set aside some time not only for that program presentation, but maybe for some let's work on ourselves a little bit. And It could be just a little bit of education. By the way, on this topic, boom, here's what I want to be able to say. It keeps it interesting, and you can dispense with a lot of the the day-to-day stuff with your consent agenda. When it comes to a retreat, I think those are always best if you can get an independent facilitator. In fact, the reality, that's how I was introduced to this board. It was right after there was a merger of two organizations, and they were concerned that the two boards coming together, they want to make sure they were on the same path, that they wanted to make sure they were getting along. And
Not easy, by the way.
Pardon me?
I was just saying, not an easy task. So
definitely not. In fact, we discussed a lot about how mergers fail, and what kind of things to look out for. So it was a great introduction to this group. And after that, 2 months later, they're like, "Hey, can you join the board? Join the board." So it is. I think it's always a good idea to have somebody independent kind of help facilitate that, so that board members can not only get to know each other a little bit better, because maybe they don't know each other that well. So you build some teamwork, and then you focus on, other board development and education opportunities.
thanks. So we'll talk a little bit
Definitely
more
put
about
some money
mergers.
aside for that. Yes.
Thank you.
Yes, so let me just add to that. So typically the retreats that I've participated in, have been almost a full day, and it's around the strategic planning cycle that people use the boards use this to do their strategic planning. Now, there's also an opportunity within that to let's do some work on ourselves when we're talking about or revisiting the mission, vision, and values. That's a really good opportunity to have some insightful conversations about, are we meeting our mission? Are we moving towards our vision? And do our values help us on that journey? And if not, how do we need to behave? How do we make this adjustment? And so I've been on both ends of the spectrum where an organization can afford a consultant to do that, and that's definitely best case scenario. But I've been on the other side of that where there are no funds to get a strategic planning consultant. So that's my time and my talent. That's so I recently did a strategic planning retreat for a board that I serve on, and it's you have to walk that line carefully, do a bit of a dance because you do have a dog in the fight, but at the same time you have to be at arm's length as a good facilitator would be. But sometimes you have to insource those things because that's the only alternative.
Thank you. This is really rich stuff, and I'm sure very, very helpful to me, and I think very helpful to everybody listening. I'm going to begin the transition into some of the questions coming from the floor, and the first of those is one of mine as well, and it has to do with the executive director role. That is the relationship, I should say, between the board chair and the executive director. I wonder if you could talk a little bit about that, and we can spend a little time on this. But the question, I assume this is Melanie Weinrobs from NYCCT, is it the executive director's responsibility to follow up on board dues payments or the board chairs? And I think there may be a two-stage answer to that question, but I'm going to go to you first, Mary Ellen, because I believe you brought up that example of having the ED give a call to somebody who was not being up to date with dues.
Yeah, so from an operational point of view, the ED kind of tracks, what comes in, what goes out, and keeps on top of that. And we'll make general announcements about, okay, everybody's dues are, they're due in April. I have 8 out of 15 people just as reminders. And then I think when it comes down to an individual, the board president or the board chair will make that call.
So it's the executive director starting the conversation. It's the
Yeah.
board chair following up when you need the serious muscle.
Yeah.
Board chair is the heavy.
Yeah.
Breaks kneecaps. That's how you get it.
Okay, no, I appreciate that. There's an anonymous attendee who asked, it's really difficult sometimes to find board members who can give money and also time. And you both addressed this earlier. Do you have to off-ramp somebody who isn't participating and just have a smaller board? And of course, it goes both ways, right? There are the people who participate but don't give or can't. And there are the people who give lavishly, but you might not see them more than once a year. So could you talk about those two circumstances?
Well, if I may, it kind of goes back to that time, talent, and treasure. And I think that it's okay if you've got, when we talk about all these things that we expect out of a board member, it's okay if they're missing a few of them because they simply aren't good at it. As a result, if they're really pitching in some other area, like I said, if someone is constantly providing their talents, they're stepping up, they have an expertise in a certain area, say they're a legal expert and you're going through an issue where you're dealing with contracts, you're buying a building or whatever the case may be, and that person could be spending a lot of time on that. As far as I'm concerned, if they don't give us $1, I realize the value of the time they just gave us. So I don't think it's really appropriate to expect all members to provide, all of those things we look for, but it's kind of an amalgam. And if somebody's really pitching in one area, then I think it's perfectly okay to not expect much on some other area like fundraising. If I'm spending a lot of time, I'm probably less likely to give you my money as well because my time is my money.
Yeah, and John, I totally agree with that. On balance, what kind of contribution is this person making to the organization? And it has to not be hard and fast and rigid, but flexible enough to support the organization in many different ways.
Absolutely. And I agree with all of that with what I hope is a friendly amendment. I hope that everybody encourages their board members to give something, even if it's $5, because there are lots of funders who are very reluctant to even allow you to apply for a foundation grant if you can't demonstrate 100% board participation in supporting the organization financially. I've never seen one that puts a dollar value on that,
Right.
but a participation point, that is a very, very important piece of the action, I think. Um,
Absolutely.
we have a very quick question, and Mary Ellen, you had mentioned the library resource from the Pennsylvania Library that you adopted for the Albany regional libraries, and that would be if that is available online. This individual would love to know if that can be gotten somewhere.
Okay, yeah, it's called The Simple Plan. And, I would have to Google it again to get that, that citation, if you will. But it's called The Simple Plan, and it was a Pennsylvania library. And
Thank you.
maybe we can follow up and push this out to you with the details. How's that?
Exactly. We'll try to kick that out to you. Question, really good one from Jason Kaufman. Our NPO is growing and maturing. We are a working board and just launched a finance and audit committee and a reserve fund. What is the next board committee and/or control function we should create to further develop our organizational maturity?
Ooh.
And he is with Second Chance Foods.
So he says he already has a finance and audit committee?
Yes, and a reserve fund.
Oh, very nice.
We were just not a committee, but a fund.
Sure, sure. Well, I can only speak to, certainly you want it, your executive committee and your finance committee are something that, the committees of the board, and they are the most important ones to have, the most important standing committees to have. Beyond that, I actually think you think I might say the personnel committee or an HR committee, but I'm not, because that's my business. But I think some kind of a program committee. Again, I think that once you've got the basics in place, the finance and audit, which again are all, required essentially in New York, program committee, I think would be the next one, because that again connects the board to the services, to the mission, also provides that level of oversight operationally, not just administratively, but operationally. I think a program committee would be probably a good next step. Mary Ellen?
Yeah, so I'll add to that. A couple of boards that I've served on have had governance committees, and their responsibility would be policies and procedures. Making sure that you have all of those as a nonprofit that you need to have, and that they're reviewed on a regular basis and amended according to the most current requirements. And also another function of that committee would be recruitments, nominations of board members. And that may sit somewhere else on a board, but typically it's in governance. And then the other piece of governance is the personnel or the HR function of, making sure that there are performance plans and performance evaluations for the executive director, typically.
Yep.
Those are great suggestions, and I don't think you could go wrong going with any one of them. And that sort of rises in ascending order through the sort of fiduciary responsibilities of the organization as well. So,
Yeah, and let me just add one, sorry if I might, that's seasonal, a strategic planning committee.
yes.
Often a board will stand up a strategic planning committee when the cycle is ready to begin, that 3 to 5 year cycle. And so it's made up of board members and certainly executive director and appropriate other folks to make sure that that work gets done for that cycle.
And it's absolutely critical. We just finished our Nikon strategic plan. Please go on our website and read it. We're very proud. John.
Another commercial, there we go.
I'd like to make a final comment on committees too. We were always a very heavily involved board and had a lot of committees, and I'm kind of a keep it simple kind of guy. So when you're doing your bylaws or you're assessing what kind of committees you really need to have, I say take your standing committees and make sure that they're just the most needed. Keep the standing committee list relatively short. And things like, Mary Ellen mentioned about strategic planning, that's great. You can have an ad hoc committee that gets together, finishes the plan, and then disbands. So I like the idea of having as few standing committees as possible, but then utilize the ad hocs as things pop up, so it's just an organizational thing for me. Keep it simple.
Yeah, and I totally agree. When, I started out in saying that, structure is important, and kind of laying out the work and how you're going to work and how you're going to achieve those outcomes for the organization. At the same time, don't make it bureaucratic. Don't make it heavy. Don't make it impossible to achieve. Yeah, so lean and mean is a good way to go, as long as you're covering all the bases.
Absolutely. Well, I'm going to go to a question from Andrea asking about strategic planning, among other things. And Amanda, don't worry, I haven't forgotten about you. Just that Andrea's is germane to the conversation that's unfolding right now. She'd like to know how a small, all-volunteer-run nonprofit hold a retreat when our board members are located all over the country. Should the nonprofit pay for their travel and overnight stay? And how can I find a person like Mary Ellen to lead the strategic planning process? This is your opportunity
This
for
gun's for
shameless.
hire. Well, that's a good question and very appropriate to the times. So you can do it virtually, because we have a lot of experience with that now. I personally am a bit old school. I like face-to-face because I like to be able to read the room, read the body language. I like to, if I'm the facilitator, I like to walk around and mingle and do group breakouts and, touch base with everybody as that's all happening. So, I think there's nothing better than face to face. That said, virtual can work. And if you have the resources to bring people together, and, for strategic planning, you're probably only going to do this every 3 years or so. So it might be a good investment in your resources to not only bring people together for the strategic plan, but it helps in the team building and the relationship building aspects for people to really meet face to face at least every once in a while.
I couldn't agree anymore.
Yep.
Getting together face to face is always more effective, especially when you're on. This is a team, folks, and teams, need to be able to collaborate together. And there's no better way to do that than to have that interpersonal interplay face to face.
Yep. And Andrea, I don't know if your organization is composed of individuals who are remote but come together for other purposes, conferences or some kind of work product that would allow you all to see one another, but that might be an opportunity to kill two birds with one stone. But if you don't have that opportunity to see one another, I'm just going to echo what John and Mary Ellen are saying, that it is really super valuable to have the opportunity for FaceTime and to get to know one another a little bit better than you can ever do on screens like this one. Let me just say, by all means, write Mary Ellen, and see if she can serve your needs in this space. But this is one of the areas where we help people through Nikon. So we have a robust strategic planning function, and if you're interested, please get in touch with Megan. Actually, you could do it during this call, and we can tell you what kinds of resources are available. I promised Amanda that we get back to her question, and she is seeking advice as the board chair of an organization that has a legacy board who have historically not contributed financially, although we officially state that there is a 10K annual give-get. Other expectations, such as board meeting attendance and engagement, have not historically been enforced. We are now looking to recruit new board members. How can we set new expectations for a healthy board? For all board members, both the legacy folks and the new members. Great question, and all too common a problem. Who'd like to dive first on this one?
Well, I'll start off. Again, all you can do is remind people of what they signed up for, and hopefully you've got some of this. Actually, may have to go back to your bylaws. I think that personally, I believe that board terms make sense. If your bylaws don't state, how else do you turn over a board? And, I don't want to say weed out, but how do you move your legacy members off the board? I think terms make a lot of sense, because they do help get fresh blood on a board and allow a board to evolve properly. So that might be one of the critical things to look at first. Secondly, I think that if you get new board members in and they buy into the expectation, The other board members then hopefully will see somehow by the executive reporting, X amount of people have contributed, X amount have not, that they will kind of realize, okay, I'm now in the minority and I need to step up. Or maybe you just need to adjust your expectation a little bit as well.
Yeah, it sounds like it's time for a reset, to look back on, how is this working for the organization or what's not working? And yeah, refer back to the bylaws, and are there terms, and is there a way to refresh and inject new ideas, new energy? If there's a legacy board and forever? Do you get to serve forever? That's extraordinary. So yeah, it's time for a reset, a reevaluation, and then working with your bylaws and your charters, and making some adjustments, and then communicating the why. Why is this changing? How does it help the organization? What is changing? What does it mean for the organization? What does it mean for you as an individual? And honoring the past, uh, as you move forward to create that new future.
Mm-hmm.
I agree with everything that everybody said here. I'll just add one thing. The desire, which I gather is shared among the members of the board to bring on new members, does give you an opening to create a pivot. To say, when we bring these new people to get on board, we want to make sure that we get the most out of them and that they get the most out of this experience. So let's recommit to whatever it is. If you don't have term limits in your bylaws, it might not be the best time to press the idea of having them. Although you could say, we'd like to bring these people aboard, but we need to have an opportunity to ask them to leave, if appropriate. And let's think about structuring that thing in now. But I must say, overall, if you have a $10,000 or whatever the figure is, a give-get floor, and it's ignored, that's corrosive. If you allow people never to attend meetings, but they stay on the board, that's corrosive. So I think you're absolutely right to be concerned about these things. And now indeed is the time to tackle it. I think you have a great opportunity to do that. Joe Curto, I think that answers your question on term limits for the board chair, which would follow along in the conversation about limits for members overall. Which brings me to Stephanie Ehrlich's question. Can you speak more about how to take on strategic planning when you do not have the means to hire an external consultant? And she is the executive director of the Van Cortlandt Park Alliance in the Bronx, a lovely piece of green space in that borough.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so I'll just sort of piggyback on what I had said earlier. Look to the folks that serve on your board. Does anybody, one or two, or it could be more people, have experience in strategic planning? And could they help pull that together for you? So a board I just became a member of has one person staff, a very small staff, and the resources go into the programming. And it's a musical organization, and so it's just in and out for the programming. And so there aren't resources for strategic planning. But I and another new member both have experience, and so we're going to put together this and do it for the group. So yeah, if you kind of insource it, as I mentioned earlier, that's a pathway. Is there somebody outside of the group that has experience that would do it on a voluntary basis just because they like the organization, and you give them free tickets to this or that or whatever services your board is there some get for them as they give you this time and resource?
And I'll only add that, the strategic planning process, also it needs to be customized to the organization. If it's a
Yes.
very
Yeah.
small organization, I call it strategic planning light. You could do something very
Yep.
quick and easy. It could end up just being a work plan for the following year or something. But really, it has to be customized and appropriate for the size organization, the complexity of the organization. The larger you are, the more you want to put into the process, and vice versa.
Yeah,
Thank
no,
you.
you're exactly right, John. I always take a look at it. What can the organization give at this point in time? In terms of their time, their attention to, at least minimally meet the deliverable, the goal here. And so that's why you have to be flexible about these things. And you can do it in pieces, like you do the SWOT analysis at one point, and then work it piece by piece. And maybe you can't pull people together for a full day retreat. You figure it out.
And let me call attention to a recommendation from my Board Strong colleague, Janet Farrell, in the chat. And this is in the chat box right above Megan Allen's contribution, 3 from the bottom. Thought on strategic plan, you don't need to keep the committee in existence, but appoint a board champion and review one element of the plan at each board meeting, which could be adapted to the creation of a planning cycle as well. Right? So you can take it in pieces rather than having to deal with it all at once. I would want to introduce Irene Banning, who's just joined us. We're kiting into the final couple of minutes, Irene, but I wonder if you wanted to share a couple of words about who you are and your perspective on the board work that you do.
Sure. So I want to apologize for having missed the prep panel, but it got lost. So I'm Irene Banning. I'm currently the chair of an organization called the Northeast Community Center, which is a multi-purpose social service organization in the northeastern part of Dutchess County, New York, a organization that existed for 37 years, small, struggling, all of the things that small social services, especially in rural areas, are. Before that, I served on the board of the Cary Institute for Ecosystem Studies and also as their board chair for 7 years, which is a independent research and academic research organization, also located here in Dutchess County, but works nationally and internationally. A very different animal from Northeast Community Center, has a huge endowment, has 100 employees, and all of that kind of stuff. So those are my 2 primary experiences as a board member and a board chair, and they could not be more different if they tried.
Sounds that way.
And
in
I'd
my
be,
private, yes.
I was just going to say, I'd be remiss if you spoke to a different kind of animal, and just like the animal that's behind you, is that your day job?
That is my day job. I have a sheep farm, and that is one of my sheep.
There you go.
Thank you so much. I want to now turn back to questions. We have from Amy Harrison. Many of our legacy board members have weeded themselves out. We are at the reset point and need help in identifying new board members who have an affinity for our mission, programming, et cetera. We are currently looking to develop consultants, mentors, et cetera, who have worked with us in the past. However, as an arts organization, we have few resources. Advice, please. Also, many supporters and board members had a personal connection to the ED and the AD through past jobs they are no longer involved with. Very classic situation, right? That people are connections of the executive directors and not necessarily coming independently to the board through the board's aegis. Suggestions for Amy?
Well, I like the idea that there are people who are mission oriented, because that always helps. But again, I'm very deliberate about, and I think most boards should be, about the skills that are needed to populate a board. Look for somebody with financial skills, look for somebody with legal skills, look for somebody with, could even be insurance and real estate, depending upon the needs of the organization. But I would suggest that, in terms of outreach, use the current network that you have, because without a doubt, even current members of the board all have their own network. So it's a great opportunity to be able to hit a lot of people, as long as you're pretty, again, deliberate about specifying what kind of talent you're looking to acquire.
Yeah, so a rather unique approach, or unique to me very recently, the Berkshire Box Society pushed out to their membership, because it's a member organization, and also to people who have attended programs in the past, ticket buyers. In their newsletter, they pushed out a call for board members. And I responded to that call, and I'm now on that board. So I thought, gee, I've never seen this kind of, call for board members in this way. But that can be productive as well.
So
Right.
it's like running an ad for an opening in your organization, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Irene, anything to add on this one?
Well, chills run down my back when I hear about an open call for board members, because it sounds incredibly risky to me. I think your board and your community sort of are your best resource. And especially organizations that operate in small communities, board members, I don't know that they have to be carefully vetted, but they need to fit in because the politics of small communities need to be considered. I think in our situation, an open call would be a very risky thing to do. I think it is the networks, but it is also important to reach beyond that, right? Because otherwise our boards are going to look the same again and again and again. We have made concerted efforts and are being successful in reaching into our client base, in reaching beyond the people, making a strong point to reach beyond the people we know and beyond our comfort zones.
Thank you so much for that. We are cutting right into our last 90 seconds. So let me just add one thing on this thread before thanking everybody and kicking this back over to Megan to close us out. We are hosted, of course, today by BoardStrong. And one of the things that BoardStrong does is to offer a matching platform. It's somewhere in between the thing that sends chills up and down Irene's spine and what Mary Ellen responded to. And that is that we allow organizations to post their listings online and then potential board candidates can scan them looking at the kinds of skill sets and experience that would be desired on that board and then make appropriate matches. And we also offer that to individuals who are seeking boards. So both ways, it's a matching platform. If we don't have to get involved, it's entirely free of charge. And we urge you, please, if you aren't already signed up as an organization or as an individual seeking a placement, please do. I wish we had more time to talk about all of this. There is so much to cover in this area. We didn't even get to talk about the current challenges, but we'll have to reconvene and do that next time. Thank you very much, John Kuznia, Mary Ellen Piche, and Irene Banning. We really appreciate you sharing all of your thoughts with this community today. And thanks to everybody on the line for tuning in and listening to this BoardStrong Roundtable. Megan, back over to you.
Yeah, just very quickly, thank you as well, David, for moderating, and to all the panelists for all your insights. Really appreciate it. As was mentioned earlier, we are recording this. We will send out the recording to everyone so you can replay. And definitely keep an eye on your email as we announce other BoardStrong roundtables for the remainder of the year. Definitely check out our website, boardstrong.org, including for the platform, as David mentioned. And thank you so much for joining us, and have a great rest of your day.
Bye, everybody.
Thank you all.